Good evening. Am I audible? Am I visible? Yes. Okay. Perfect. We'll wait for 2-3 minutes and then we'll begin our analysis for today. Today we have to discuss about the Dutch, the English, which is the biggest discussion we have, the Danish, Denmark, and last the French. And we finish the Europeans today. And tomorrow's agenda is going to be understanding the regional kingdoms and then the wars. We start this third module tomorrow, second module today. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Sima, you don't have to worry about making notes. Whatever I have written in the PPT is more than enough. So you don't have to bother. Rather use the time in revision in that sense. Manish, I have not told you the difference between Mansabdari Jagirdari. You have to wait for that, but to give you a basic understanding, a Mansabdar could be paid in cash, but if a Mansabdar is paid in Jagir, it's called a Jagirdar. But that's something which you need to know in medieval India. There's much more intricacies which we'll discuss. So why Portuguese were not interested in eastern regions such as Odisha? They basically wanted to control this coast because the Arab traders, be it the Saudi Arabian sector, this was more. They did not want to interact with the Southeast Asian sector. As it is, they tried to establish themselves in Bengal, but they were not given permission and they were not able to generally. We'll discuss that, Soumya. The regional kingdoms are not under the imperialism of the British, but you will see what is going to happen. You need to just remember, Akshay, the names of Almeida, Albuquerque, Cunha, and the last, which is Souza. Why all Europeans took east route? Why not west route? Ashwin, have to qualify in what sense you are saying. They entered India from the western route, not the eastern route. The note summary is enough. Yes, Kishore. Yeah, yes, Krishna. Good evening, sir. Ashay. Okay, Ashay. Nitya, I'm not speaking loudly. I'm waiting for people to join in. That is why you are hearing a lower voice. I'm waiting for people to come in. So still people are joining in. Yes, Sham, you can do that. Sir, can we do previous year questions? Bhagat, yes, we'll do it tomorrow. First, let me cover a certain portion. Then only previous year questions without teaching you that module or that topic makes no sense. You think I'll try to do that? So in this subject, there is no current affairs concept. That is not true because certain personalities always remain in the news. They become relevant for your preparation. The language of the Mughals they used Urdu, they used Hindi. They had multiple languages. There's no concept of that. I mean, why can't they take westward side through Pacific Ocean through the that is Pacific is too problem is Pacific, there's no land in between. You will never be able to come to the Indian side from the reverse because when you are in the Atlantic, you still have the African continent on your right, on your left, but in Pacific you have to go into the deep sea. That is not something which everybody can do. European countries have colonized a significant amount of countries, but their GDP is not so high. Kirti, the reason is not because they colonized us, that at that time their GDP was very high. It's the post-colonial world and the Second World War which destroyed them. Rakesh will do that. Once we have covered a certain portion, we'll talk about mains answer writing also. This class are enough for modern history. Obviously, that is why I am teaching. So was there any reason because of which Europeans need to find sea route? Other than, no, it's basically block of Ottomans. I'm waiting 1 more minute, then we start. Perfect, Kanika, thank you for that. Was there any reason I've answered that? Which manuscript tells about the Mughals? Rakesh, look around you. You'll find multiple monuments. You don't need to have a manuscript which talks about the Mughals. There are texts, there are literature. The Taj Mahal did not create itself. So, any city you are in, most probably there would be a Mughal monument for sure. Did modern India cover the mains question? Yes. I understand what you're trying to ask me. Yes, yes, and yes. So don't worry about that. No, Shabir. No. Okay. So yesterday it was about understanding the Portuguese, how they came in 1498, 1500 Cabral, 1501 Vasco da Gama comes back. Thereafter 1503, 5, 7 and 9 with Kochi, Cananor, Battle of Chaul, Battle of Dew, where the Portuguese reassert their power. And by 1510 they take Goa. By 11 they have the Calicut sector, the Malaccan state again. By 13 they have Calicut. By 15 they are controlling the Hormuz Strait. By 1529 they have shifted the capital from Kochi to Goa, and by 1535 they taken Dew from Bahadur Shah of Gujarat. So very simply, this is how the Portuguese expanded in India. And the Portuguese presence in India from 1500 to 1600 was very, very single handed power they were. Basically, no real power was there as a European power to challenge the Portuguese. Now, till this point, till this point, we all are on the same page and we understand the Portuguese impact, we understand the Portuguese presence, and we understand the Portuguese politics. So if I use the word Almeida, Albuquerque, or Souza, or Cunha, or Francis Xavier, you understand it. Because if we all are on the same page, then we take the story forward and analyze Portuguese colonialism in India. And why is that we did not go into Portuguese colonialism? See, logically, Portuguese were the first here, and no one else was here. So the Portuguese could have easily captured India. But there's a problem, and that problem is in their model of colonialism. So, can I take the story forward and analyze Portuguese colonialism and then talk about the Dutch? Yes? Okay. Now, so now everyone's ready. I want you to concentrate. People are still joining in. I know your names, so don't worry. I am now starting the analysis for today. I have waited close to 10 minutes. Now, see, the Portuguese were the first to come to India. And between 1498 and 1535 till 1600, there's nobody really to challenge the Portuguese in India. And the Portuguese could have easily expanded into India via meddling into local politics, or basically, if they had a good plan, they could have very simply been the pioneers of Portuguese colonialism in India, and we would not be speaking English right now. We would be speaking Portuguese, and we would have gone under Portuguese colonialism. But there's a problem. The problem is that the model of Portuguese colonialism is flawed, because these fools thought that controlling the unbounded sea is like controlling that country. In the sea, there are no boundaries. You are obsessed with the blue waters policy, but to there with no real proper presence in the Indian Ocean, with a handful of ships, you can't do blue waters policy. So, with 10 people, you can't patrol a state like Tamil Nadu. So, if I give you 10 cars and say, go to every part of Tamil Nadu and check if everything is happening, you can't do that. It's too big a state for 10 people to manage. Same way, the Portuguese, as much as how many ships they can deploy, the Indian Ocean is very big. And more than that, their problem is that they don't understand one more point, that if you just dot with basic small outposts, you don't really control that area. You could have a proper fort in that sector, but if you are not expanding into India, then your colonialism is incomplete. You are just an annoying power, that is it. You are an annoyance and your model is flawed. So the problem with the Portuguese was that they did not understand the difference between colonialism and controlling the seas. And the Portuguese were undermanned, were very serious issues of what we call as deployment of ships, and blue waters policy was never practical and never successful on the ground generally. So one thing is very clear, that the Portuguese, in their arrogance of controlling the seas, Portuguese had a run of 100 years in the Indian subcontinent, and they could have created a very beautiful model of colonialism, but they were just contended, or rather we'll say they were obsessed. They were obsessed in controlling the seas and developing outposts to control the sea. Now, very simply, this meant that even when somebody emerges in 1600, that power still has a chance. Still has a chance. Because the political situation and the colonial model, there's still gaps, and India or Indian subcontinent is fully open for colonialism. So one thing is very clear, that the Portuguese messed it up. They could have been the foremost colonial power in India, but they messed it up. Their basic point is outpost, sea control, trade, and no territorial expansion. No territorial expansion. They do not have a proper model of colonialism. So do we understand the flaw in the Portuguese model? Do we understand that you can't control a continent like India by just having four points of Diu, Daman, Goa, Kannur, and Kochi, and you can't control the high seas by having just small ports which you are controlling. And one of the reasons why the Portuguese actually were so lethargic in India was that these fools got obsessed with Brazil. As soon as they will get Brazil in Latin America, they will start to concentrate on the Brazilian sector, which is that they will try to make Brazil a proper colony, but they did not realize that the real sone ki chidiya, as we call it, the real wealth was not in Brazil, was in India. And controlling the Indian trade would have been much more profitable than controlling Brazil. But they were obsessed in that side of the world and not this side. So if I say to you that in 1600, if you and me had a boat and we came to India, would we have a chance to colonize India? Would we have a chance to colonize India? Yes. So if all of us just took time and effort, we could have easily captured the Indian subcontinent, because the Portuguese were not interested in a way in controlling what we call as territorial India, or the major wealth sections or prosperous sections of India, which were North India and South India at this point of time. So why are Indian kings not reacted when Portuguese controlling coastline? They did react. That is the Battle of Chaul and Battle of Diu. But India, understand one thing, except for the Cholas and the Marathas, no Indian power was ever obsessed with navies. This was one of the issues. This was one of the issues in our political setup, that we tend to, except for Marathas and the Cholas, we tend to be more elephant based, 1 lakh army, 2 lakh army, territorial power. And that is why the Europeans were very good in using naval power to dominate their or to assert their domination. So political and colonial model needs or has gaps. So now can we talk about 17th century? Can we talk about the turn of the century and what happens in 1600? Because one thing is clear, the Portuguese have messed it up. Are we all on the same page? Because you are analyzing why is that the Portuguese were not able to be what they were. Okay. One more important point is that the Portuguese were literally annoying. Because between this period of 1500 and 1600, there was a person called Father Pinheiro. Father Pinheiro, one second, Pinheiro. Father Pinheiro used to sit in Jahangir's court between 1600 and 1613. And the Portuguese were literally annoying. Everything which Jahangir used to do, Portuguese, this father had a problem. This father had a problem. Don't do this, don't do that. Christianity does not allow you to do this, that. Jahangir literally used to think, what have I actually, in goodwill, I have allowed this Portuguese to sit in my court, but he literally is annoying so much that by 1608, Jahangir was looking for alternative. He felt suffocated by the Portuguese. You all would have that person in your life who literally has something to say when you do good or bad. You do good, they will say negative. You do bad, they will still say negative. So they have something to say for sure when you are doing something. And imagine that person sitting in your court and every time doing something. No, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is not right, this is not wrong, this is wrong. It's and Jahangir, see, Jahangir could have removed him from his court. But it's a graceful way. See, you are try to think Akash like a king. You can't be Jahangir and say this Portuguese is annoying and let him remove. No, you can't do that. You have to be graceful. You have to be graceful. So that okay, he's constantly in my ears, so let him stand in the back a little bit. Let him scream from there. So very simply, what I'm trying to argue here is the Portuguese had a golden opportunity, literal golden opportunity, but they messed it up badly. They messed it up badly because of a flawed model of colonialism and their general lethargy in understanding the value of India, which is going to be actually something which the next power is also going to not realize. So, when the century turns in 1600, when the century turns, the next power to come to India are going to be the Dutch. Just to give you the reference of what are the countries which we are talking about, the first country to come to India was the Portuguese. Were the Portuguese. Thereafter, the second country would be Netherlands, who India play on this Sunday, which is the Dutch. Dutch, Netherlands, same thing. Then it will be the English, which is United Kingdom. So you have the Dutch, the English, the Portuguese first. Then will come the Danes. Third, no, not third, fourth, the Danes from Denmark. And last power is going to be the French. Now, please do not quote me random books and random concepts, because this is really the sequence. What you will quote me, I know, is the sequence of their East India companies. But their presence in India is like this: Portuguese, Dutch, English, Danes, French. According to when they established their first factory. We go according to how the when first factory is established. So because the Portuguese did not have an East India Company, that type of comparison doesn't really work. So very simply, now we have to talk about the Dutch. How did they come to India? Why did they come to India? And what is the context in which they interact with the Portuguese? So the Portuguese control these points. They control Goa, they control Calicut, they control Cananore, they control Kochi. So very simply, they control this coast. They also control the Malacca Strait, Malacca, they control Hormuz, they control Mozambique. So you can see that the presence of the Portuguese is concentrated in this sector, concentrated in this sector, and that is basically to control the Indian Ocean by controlling certain points. The person who used to control this whole sector used to sit in India. So from Goa, this whole sector was coordinated, be it Alfonso de Albuquerque or anyone, they will concentrate from Goa, and in a way, they will be the most ubiquitous power in this area. You can add Dew if you want to, sure. You can add Basin if you want to. The simple point is the the whole sector is dotted by the Portuguese. Now the Portuguese were operating from here. And the Portuguese, in a way, knew how to come to this sector very well. However, the Portuguese had messed up this whole plan. Between 1600, 1500 and 1600, the Portuguese did not create effective power or presence. Or presence. Now, I hope if the students are saying there's an issue, just refresh or join from a different device. Majority of you, 99% of you, have no issues, I think. So some of you are keep constantly messaging. If there's an issue, refresh or change the device if possible. Okay. Yes, Nitin, that is the book. Yellow, orange colored book. I will have my name on it. Okay, no issues, right? It's only certain students who are having this issue. Just refresh. How the Portuguese came, Pavitra, now you're asking me, and this is called Gajini effect. Yesterday was all about talking about the Portuguese, that how did they come. Now you are asking me what Portuguese, which Portuguese, how did they come. So Vasco da Gama came, then Cabral came, thereafter again Vasco da Gama came, then they started to establish Calicut, Kochi, Cananore, Goa, Diu. This is what I discussed with you in the beginning, right? How did the Portuguese establish themselves in India? This is what we discussed. So don't do this to me, which is I am going forward and you're asking me something from the back end. That is not something you do. This is least I expect is you can revise if you are not able to remember over 24 hours. That is an expectation which I have from you. So I hope that Pavitra, it rings a bell when I talk about Almeida, Albuquerque, and these people, right? Okay, perfect, Prabjot, perfect, very good. So perfect, Prabjot. Okay, so very simply, Portuguese had an opportunity. They were not able to take it. Anybody has any fundamental issue in understanding this point? I can't emphasize enough. I've repeated 3 times because there has been a gap between yesterday and tomorrow or whatever it may be. So can we talk about the Dutch without any issue with the Portuguese? I want this assertion. It may seem that I'm being repetitive, but now I will transition away from it. Okay. Now, when you talk about the Dutch, see, the Dutch saw that the Portuguese are dominating this trade. The Dutch, when they will emerge in this sector, they will see the lucrative nature of this area. So the Dutch, what they saw was the lucrative nature of controlling trade with China and India. So they saw that if we can actually challenge the Portuguese, we can take a share out of it. So the it's a purely economic decision they've taken. The economic consideration, will rather say, economic consideration, and now they want to challenge the British in this, the Portuguese in this sector. So it's a proper economic consideration that let us try to undercut the Portuguese. They had 100 years to figure it out. They were not able to. Now the crown actually did not want to get involved vis-a-vis its own army and its own military directly. So rather it established a crown-owned Dutch East India Company. This company was authorized by the Dutch crown to fight, to wage war, and challenge the Portuguese. So think of it like that the government of India does not want to fight directly. So rather it creates a new PSU. It creates, for example, it uses MTNL or BSNL to fight with a power overseas. So you are masking the the power behind the East India Company. Now the Dutch East India Company, the the natural acronym of East India Company should be what? If you make an acronym of East India Company, what should be the acronym? Acronym means short form or the first 3 letters. It should be EIC. Very good. However, the Dutch East India Company was not called EIC because the Dutch spelling of the East India Company does not start with E or I or C. It's called VOC. It's called VOC. The SME, I just encourage you to type on Google Dutch East India Company and the Dutch spelling is going to come. Just post it into the chat box and then the students will realize why it's called the VOC. It's, yes, Akash has already done that for us. The VOC comes from this word, which is a Dutch word. So when you translate this Verinde Oostenscheep campaign, you get East India Company in English. So this is why in the examination, As soon as you see the VOC written, you should know it is the Dutch which they are referring to. So the Dutch East India Company was the reason why the crown wanted to find. See, the crown could not. It's a very good way of Garima actually fighting, which is that you create a PSU, you create a company owned by the state, and then you can say that we are not involved. It's an independent body which is doing it. So it's basically to mask their presence. They are using Dutch military, they're using Dutch navy, but they want to do it via concept of a company controlling this area. So rather than giving it, see, a crown does not have ministries. Try to understand this point. If you have to give foreign relations to somebody in democracy, which minister do you give? Which minister do you give? Which minister do you give it foreign relations? Minister of External Affairs. However, the Dutch does not have, or the Dutch crown does not have a ministry. So rather than creating a ministry or external affairs ministry, they have created a company. The company is answerable to the Dutch crown. They get Dutch assistance also. But for example, the company could then take decisions which the Dutch may not be able to take because it takes time to reach back to Netherlands. Please understand this point. That the point is, Saloni, not that it is a constitutional monarchy or a monarchy or this and that. England is going, the point here is that the way they are masking their presence is more important. And it is a monarchy only, and it is easier to operate through a company than to operate through your own minister. Because what happens is, if there are multiple people involved, there is less chance of that company becoming or that person becoming too powerful. Imagine that the Dutch give this power to one person and that person starts to control India, then he will obviously become a parallel power center. So rather you create a company which is always subservient to you. Getting my point, or getting the point why they try to mask their presence? Because as it is, you tell me, and this is a very, very good question. You tell me that if I reach India and I say that I represent the Dutch crown, give me some land. And this is the first scenario. And the second scenario is, I come and say I'm a East India Company, I am the VOC, and I represent the Dutch crown. They have sent sweets for you. Can you give us a small land on which we can trade? In which scenario the Indian ruler is going to give you land? In which scenario? First or second? Second. So they are masking their presence, that we are just traders. हम तो घूमने आए हैं. We are here to just, we like the weather in India. We want some pepper. We will go back. This is called masking colonialism. It's a very interesting thing because their imperial ambitions are masked by their commercial interest. Very good, sir. Very, very well put that way. That, and I'll use her words itself, that they are masking the imperialistic interest in commercial interest. You would have seen it for sure in your life also. There will be people who will come and very close to you. You are in a bank, nobody is helping you. That person helps you. Once that person helps you, he will also put in a scheme in front of you. Now that I've helped you, this is a scheme you can join. This is called masking your real intention. So the Dutch crown have now taken upon themselves that we can't allow the Portuguese to enjoy what is called the East Indies. They're called East India because anything for the Europeans on this side is called West Indies, and this side is called East Indies. Cape of Good Hope is basically the point for for West and East. So all companies which will come in India will be called East Indian or East India, which is East Indies. On the other hand, West Indies. West Indies, East Indies. That is the logic of using that word. Now, are we clear with regards to why did the Dutch come, which is to catch its economic consideration, and why did they create a crown-owned company so as to mask their presence in India? Are we clear with regards to this? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, very good. Now, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting story how everything is unfolding. But the Dutch were also, in a way, a little bit dumb. See, the first Dutch to come to India was a person called Cornelius de Houtman. Houtman came, traded, saw the potential, and went back and said to the Dutch that there's a lot of potential in Indian trade. We should get involved in this area. However, based on this impulse, in 1602, the VOC will be established. The VOC will be established. And in 1605, the first place where the Dutch showed their presence was what is now called Machilipatnam, but used to be called Mosliepatnam. This is the first colony which they have in 1605. 1602, their East India Company is basically established, and 1605 they have reached the Mosliepatnam sector. Thereafter, they will go further and take by 1609 what is called Pulicat, which is the Pulicat Lake sector. And by 1616, they will establish themselves in Surat. They will establish themselves in Surat, not necessarily in that area, that is not Surat, but Surat. And by 1663, they will be in Cochin. VOC will be established in Netherlands and it will cooperate in India. Now, if you see that the Dutch have a little bit interesting strategy. They are just not concentrating on this part. They are not just concentrating on this part. They are concentrating on both sides of the Indian subcontinent, which is Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. So their presence starts in Mosliepatnam, goes to Pulicat, but then they go to Surat also, and then they also go to Kochi. So they are, in a way, operating in the same zone, but on both sides. And what happens is, as soon as the Dutch enter the Indian subcontinent, now the Portuguese are very simply going to challenge them. But the Dutch were much more powerful than the Portuguese at this point of time. And the Dutch will literally humiliate the Portuguese. The Dutch ship entered into the Indian Ocean, then into the Arabian Sea. Portuguese ship will intersect. And it will say, Cartas, Blue Waters policy. Almeida has said you need to have a permission letter. Dutch bola, you come here, you want a permission letter, you come here. And they will sink 3 military ships of the Portuguese on the spot. And then they will say, now ask me for a permission letter. It is not that this has been given as a hereditary land to you that you are asking for cartas. So very simply, the Dutch, as soon as they will enter the Indian subcontinent, they will literally start to take away sectors out of the Portuguese. Their presence in 1663 in Kochi itself tells you that they were now sitting in the same place where the Portuguese were. It's basically like having your shop in front of your rival shop that you want to dominate. You had 100 years, you did not do anything. Now it's not your time. But the problem which the Dutch have is that they again get distracted. And their distraction is that they become obsessed with this point, which is Malacca. See, Blue Waters policy is there throughout. It is being taken forward by the other governors also. But as soon as the Dutch entered in 1600, there was no chance that the Blue Waters policy was actually going to work. So very simply, the Dutch being here was a very important change for the Indian subcontinent because the power of the Portuguese is checked. But again, the Dutch, as much as they are trading inside India, they are very well connected to even interior parts of Agra and also. But they will get obsessed with the states of Malacca. What they will do is that they will wrestle Malacca away from, they will take Malacca away from the Portuguese, and thereafter they will now start to control the Indonesian sector. Basically, the Dutch, rather than expanding in India, Indonesia goes into Dutch colonialism. So they were very interested in controlling any movement out of this area into the South China Sea, into the South China Sea. The South China Sea is something which they were really interested in and wanted to control this whole sector. So very simply, the Dutch also got distracted. They could have easily undercut the Portuguese, and they did do that. But they were not interested in India only. They were not interested in India only. And this is a problem for India because now do you get it why when the English come, there is still a gap in India. The English were the third power to come to India. But they still did not or were not fully challenged by the Portuguese or the Dutch. The Dutch were happy to control Malacca and destroy Portuguese presence, but they were interested zero, nothing at all in the Indian sector. So Dutch colonialism, the VOC also establishes itself here. So Portuguese power has been destroyed and the Dutch have moved to Indonesia. Why am I talking you about this is because you need to understand the context in which the English land in India. The English land in India when the Portuguese are at the weakest and the Dutch really don't care about the Indian subcontinent. Prima facie, in hindsight, would you say that the Dutch took the right decision? If you take it vis-a-vis understanding Indonesia and India. No, very good. Because nobody was understanding the potentialities of India. You could control the Dutch sector or you could control the Indonesian sector. You can control the trade. But India literally has so much prosperity that the British became the superpower by just holding on to India. We'll talk about that, Tharva. Don't worry. That is the next module itself. Don't have to worry about that. The simple, straightforward point is, Dutch had an opportunity. They also let it slip from their hand. Can I now just tell you the basic contours of Dutch politics in India and then move to the English? What type of questions can be framed here? Ashay, what you have to actually, there can two type of questions. First is prelims question wherein they're asking you the first factory, which is Mausoleepatnam. They can ask you what is the VOC. They can ask you statement-based questions that the VOC was extremely interested in India. And mains question, they can ask you a very straightforward question. How is that, and this is a critical analysis question, how is that the third power which came to India, which is the English, were able to colonize India while the first and the second were not able to? It's a relevant question. I don't think you would have thought about it, that how is that the English were the third to come but the one to dominate India. So it's not that the Dutch don't have colonialistic intentions. They have a colonialistic intention. The Dutch just loved controlling Straits of Malacca. That is a myopic and a strategic call which the Dutch took, the VOC took, and that may have been something which they in later stages would have actually regretted also. So basically, it's like you had two openers, both had a chance to hit centuries, but they basically threw it away. And now will come, and this analogy should not be there, but now will come the English, Virat Kohli, and he will then hit the century which is called India. So it's a power vacuum. That is the point. That they both had a golden opportunity to make us speak Portuguese or Dutch. But we speak English because the English were cognizant of how India could be taken and how India was much more valuable than any other country in this area. So let's talk about the Dutch. The first Dutch or Dutchman to land into India and this whole sector was a person called Cornelius de Houtman. 1596, he reaches Sumatra, Bantam, and he reaches India. And he sees that the Portuguese have a whole free hand in ruling this sector, and it's a very lucrative trade. Based on that, in 1602, the East India Company of Netherlands, the VOC, will be established by the Dutch Crown. The company will be given power to carry on war, to conclude treaties, and have possessions and erect fortresses also. Basically, it's a commercial company, but it has the power to act like a state. The first presence of the Dutch in India will not be on the western coast, but on the eastern coast, where in Mauchlypatnam in 1605. And thereafter, they will even challenge the Portuguese within the first 5 to 6 months of their presence by capturing the Nagapatnam sector away from the Portuguese and making it a stronghold for themselves. So any presence of the Portuguese in the Bay of Bengal was very quickly taken away from the Portuguese by the Dutch. So as soon as Dutch come, Portuguese start to decline. As soon as the Dutch come, Portuguese start to decline. And thereafter, we see there's a whole flurry of the Dutch presence increasing in India. So I'll give you that timeline in the end, don't worry. So they will start to set up factories on the Coromandel coast, in the parts of Gujarat. They will also go to Bengal, Bihar, and Uttar Pradesh. They will go interior into India for trade. Their next colony is going to be in 1609, which is Pulicat, near Pulicat Lake itself. And then by 1616, they are sitting in Surat. But the most important is by 1616, they're in Surat. 1663 in Kochi. Kochi presence is important because now they've undercut the power of the Portuguese properly. In between that, they have Bichtipatnam, they have Karikal, they have Chinsura, and they have Kasim Bazar, they have the Balasore sector, they have Patna. Basically, now they are going internal into India. Factories mean that there are warehouses of the Dutch very internal into India. But the Dutch, in that regard, were not cognizant of the potentialities of controlling or becoming a territorial power in India. They were just happy to control all of this trade. And therefore, the VOC and its coins, which were issued in the Indonesian sector, they were happy to trade in indigo. They were happy to take up the textiles. They were happy to buy some opium. They were happy to take silk from Bengal. They were happy to take saltpeter, which is basically added to the gunpowder itself. They were happy to take these things. They were the ones who will take away the Sri Lankan sector, Ceylon, away from the Portuguese in 1658. Thereafter, the Dutch will then lose Ceylon in what is called the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon will fight in Europe. and Dutch had been fallen to France, the Dutch will lose Sri Lanka and it will go to France and then it will go to the British. So the Dutch used to control Sri Lanka for a brief period. Thereafter, it will be taken by the British from the French later, which is a later period. So understand this point. What are the dates which you have to remember here, or what are the basic things you have to remember? 1602, 1605, 1609, and 1663. I'm not asking you to do a thesis on the Dutch in India. What I'm trying to argue is establishment of VOC. This is Mauchlypatnam. This is a very important. See, by knowing the first colony, you will be able to eliminate any question which is there vis-a-vis a chronological question, or when it comes to knowing which colony is whose. See, in same place there could be three powers, and you will see Kochi at one point of time had a Dutch factory, had a Portuguese factory, had a British factory. So it's not that these zones are limited. And 1609 is when they get Pulicat, and you can add 1616, which is Surat, and 1663 is Kochi. If you can remember these following dates, 1605, 1609, 1663, 1616, your work is done with regards to the Portuguese, with regards to the Dutch. For me, the Dutch are a transition between the Portuguese and the English. And I just want you to understand two things here. They come into India to fight the Portuguese. They take the trade to themselves. They are able to enter into very interior parts of India also, but they get obsessed with this part of the world rather than the Indian subcontinent. The Portuguese were enjoying Brazil and the Dutch were enjoying Indonesia. So when the English will emerge, this part or this subcontinent, which is the most prosperous subcontinent in the world, is open for colonialism. Why they obsessed with Malacca? Because Malacca, if you control all trade with China. China trade was equally lucrative in that regard. So they wanted to control China trade, not Indian trade. If this all is clear, I want to talk about the English now. Your story with regards to the Dutch is over. Since the beginning of the class, in the first hour, we have discussed how the Portuguese messed it up and how the Dutch came but got obsessed with Indonesia and not take India. And I've given you three basic dates. You just need to know that the Dutch presence undercuts the Portuguese. The Portuguese will then just be limited to the small colonies which they had. Factory of VOC first established in Mauchlypatnam. First factory is that. Why they all come from same direction? Because you can't come to India from this side. You have to come like this only. So from the Pacific, it is very difficult to go like this. It's not possible. It's easier to come like this. And that is the route which Vasco da Gama also found. Dutch were interested in spice trade, but they were not interested in colonizing India. They were happy to control the trade, nothing more, nothing less. So, very simply, the Dutch did not establish themselves as the real or the what is called the paramount power in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal. Right? Why other countries like Middle East were not interested? They were not powerful enough. They were not powerful enough. It's not that they're not interested, they are not powerful enough. See, understand this point. In order to become a colonial power at this point of time, the prerequisite was to have a very strong navy. And if you are not a strong naval power and you don't have the right orientation, you'll never become a colonial power. You say that first factory was Mauchlypatnam, but you also say that it was established in 1602. Now, Seema, what was established in 1602? VOC. Company was established not in India, but in Dutch or in Netherlands. So, establishment of a company is not the same as the establishment of a factory. So you say, yes, I say. But listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying 1602 is when the VOC is established. 1605 is when the VOC established the first colony in India of the Dutch, which is Mauchlypatnam. Are these things the same thing? Are these things the same thing? So I know what I'm saying. Don't worry. I know what I'm saying. And these are two different things. So pay attention. I'm not here to confuse you. So Portuguese are done. Dutch are done. Now we need to talk about the English. Is everybody ready for an excursion into the world of the English and how they captured India? Because now this really matters to us, because the British dominated India. So we need to know what did the British do in India to actually become what they became. Factory means warehouse. Factory, company are different. Yes, factory is established by a company. Spanish, Portuguese, first movers, but yes, they both became obsessed with Latin America and they started to not care about Asia. That is why most of Latin America either speaks Spanish or Portuguese. Very good. Did Portuguese start blue waters policy when the Dutch left? The Dutch never left. The Portuguese wanted to apply it. If you are weak enough to accept it, sure. If not, doesn't really matter. Is there any mains question from this topic? Sure, it can be made and UPSC can make it for sure. But till this point, they've not asked a question from the Dutch and the Portuguese. But from the English, I will give you a mains question. I will quench that thirst of mains. So don't worry. So can we talk about the English? If everybody is on board, I don't want anything to be left behind you. मुझे कोई गिला शिकवा नहीं होना चाहिए that we didn't discuss the Portuguese and the Dutch. So because the discussion of the English is critical, the context should be clear. Okay, perfect. Now, very good. Now, 1600, rather 1500 to 1600, the Portuguese came to India. They were having a flawed colonial model. Did they stop blue waters policy? No. Whoever they can apply on, they will do it. Flawed colonial model, which is outpost and only controlling the seas. Thereafter, they are not effective enough to assert their power. And here again, it is the crown which is directly involved. Now, they will be succeeded by in 1602-205 period by the Dutch coming to India. They undercut the Portuguese via the VOC and its naval power. But their issue is they get obsessed with Indonesian sector and China trade. So the conclusion which we can come to is that when the English will get interested, the Portuguese and the Dutch have left gaps and opportunities. And see, these are things which are happening simultaneously also. So it's not that the Dutch came, then the English came. The English will be able to only establish themselves by 1613. But by 1605, the Dutch are already there. So there are gaps, but English approach was a little bit different. Anything which is written on this screen, anybody has any issue in understanding this much? That the two attempts of two colonial powers has failed. There's anybody who has any issue in this slide? Because thereafter, I will not talk about the Dutch and the Portuguese. Now I will talk about the English. No issue. Great. Now, the English crown is a little bit different. The English crown does not want to take up this fight with the Dutch directly. They don't want to go into a hassle of creating a company in which they would have to send money. And as it is, they have a lot of parliamentary control over them. So because the parliamentary control is over the crown itself cannot act independently. That may not be true for the Dutch and the Portuguese, but that is true for the English, who are a constitutional monarchy. So the crown is happy as they are today to just do their ceremonies. They just see who they want to marry and what they will get, and they are just happy to, in a way, enjoy their life. So there was no chance that the English crown was ever going to establish a East India Company. However, the English traders were getting more and more impatient. They could see that the Portuguese are leaving a gap, the Dutch are also leaving a gap, and there is a lot of money to be gained out of India and China trade. So it will be rather private individuals who will take up the initiative to establish a company that would trade in Indian subcontinent and China. And therefore, they will first take a name called, I'll show you the name so that it is clear in your mind. They'll call themselves first the merchant adventurers. And then they will call themselves the governor and the company of the merchants of London trading in the East Indies. Does not roll off the tongue too well. But basically, the merchants, English merchants, they will say, do hell with the crown. If they cannot actually understand the importance of India, we understand it. And therefore, a fundamental difference of the British and the Portuguese and the Dutch was that the East India Company, which you can see started as merchant adventurers, the British East India Company was a private body. And the technical term for it was a joint stock company. Now let's discuss this aspect of what do I mean by joint stock company. So see, when we talk about the Portuguese and we talk about the Dutch, the agents and the company which operates in India or Indian subcontinent, who gave the initial seed money, as it is called, who gave the initial investment to create the company and the agents? It is the crown. Very good. It is the crown. It is the crown which gave initial investment. Very good. Now, If I'm a public body, basically governmentally owned, they are governmentally owned, do I really need to take the tension of profit? Do I really need to take the tension of profit, being answerable, accountable to the people? Imagine that BSNL and MTL really don't care if they are fighting with the Airtel or Jio in the effective manner, because they know if we will go into loss, the government of India will fill it up. Our salaries that is going to come. We are a PSU, doesn't really matter. So very simply, these companies, these two bodies, these two powers, they were never fully aggressive in the Indian subcontinent, and more than that, they are not answerable to the people, or the profit is not a priority, or rather profit, and we'll say, and profit is not a priority. This is called the cushion of governmental power, that you are lazy, lethargic, you don't take decisions very quickly. And if you want to sneeze in India, you have to take the permission from the Portuguese and the Dutch in Europe, that can I sneeze? Then they will send a message, I want to sneeze, to Portugal and Dutch and to the Netherlands. They will say, okay, you can sneeze. It will then come as a letter to you, and then you will sneeze. So basically, this is called centralization of power, wherein everything you have to ask the crown about it. We want to fight, we want to wage a war. Now the person is standing in front of you. The person is standing in front of you. Now you will say, I want to wage a war. They will send a message. See, it takes 3 to 4 months to reach Europe. It's not that it is email, they're sending email, tag somebody. No, no. It's a proper physical message which goes to Europe. So it's basically like, for everything you have to ask your parents. So here you are asking the crown for everything. So decision making is slow. And you're not answerable to the people because you've not taken people's money. The crown wants to spend on a company, they're spending it. So if the company goes bust, still nobody really cares, because the people don't have the power to say, where did our money go? That's not the case. However, that is not the way the English operate, because when the English, or the what we call as the British East India Company is formed, it is a private joint stock company. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, see, for example, Megha wants to start a company. Megha wants to start a company. The most difficult task in starting a company is the initial capital which is needed. So what Megha says is that everybody in this class contribute 100 rupees, and in return for that 100 rupees, I will give you 1% of share in my company. 1% share in my company. This is called share or stock, which you see in that BSE Sensex, that same share stock. So what happens is that Megha does not have the initial capital, but she's able to convince others to contribute and become a company by getting the private capital into your company. So now what you have are shareholders, And what Megha has promised is that for that 100 rupees contribution, she will year on year give us 5 rupees as a profit, and when you want, you can take out that 100 rupees out. Basically, she has promised the shareholders, which is you and me, dividend or profit shared by the company to shareholders. So it is called a joint stock, meaning joint means private individuals stock because they hold shares, and company because it is a private investment. Now, if Megha doesn't give us that 5 rupees per year, would you be happy about this investment? Would you be happy about this investment? No. So basically, because you are a joint stock company, you become answerable to shareholders and accountable for profit. So very simply, now Megha is under pressure to always generate profit. Now, because she is always under pressure to generate profit, her approach is aggressive. So what basically the East India Company used to be is a private joint stock company which used to have shareholders, and these shareholders used to elect a court of directors, initially 5 directors, and the court of directors used to take decisions for the company shareholders. Basically, like today you have board of directors, but it's called the court of directors. And the court of directors have to generate profit for sending dividend. And more than that, because it is a joint stock company, East India Company is listed in the London Stock Exchange. So you and me, if we were citizens or British citizens, we had the opportunity of buying a stock of the East India Company. It was told, it is basically like Tata Group selling its stock, Reliance selling its stock, or what we call as shares. Now, if you look at it, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and this is also going to be the case for the French later, and the English, there's a fundamental difference in their approach in the Indian subcontinent. All these 3 powers will operate. Now I'm trying to conclude this section for you. Will operate via companies or agents which are appointed by the government or crown. When it comes to initial investment, it is the government. There is no answerability or accountability, and therefore they are slow to respond and non-aggressive in Indian subcontinent. That may not be true for the French fully, but the first part may be true, which is being slow to respond. We'll talk about the French also. On the other hand, the English, private joint stock company, wanted to trade in India. Shareholders have given initial investment, and they have to generate profit, and they are answerable to the British people, British shareholder, and therefore much more aggressive and responsive to Indian politics. Are we clear with regards to what is this difference? What is this difference? And in the mains examination, they can ask you that what is the fundamental difference between the English and the other European powers. And it's not that the English came third or that the Indian sector was open. That is a subsidiary point. It's just that the English were more engrossed in generating profit. And I will show it to you. That how the English will expand in India quickly vis-a-vis the Portuguese, Dutch, and the French. French will keep on sleeping. They will come in 1668. But when the English come, they are ready to also play a very interesting card, which is called the beggar's card. That we are they will not say we represent the mighty Portuguese and the Dutch monarchy. No. They will say we are traders. भगवान के लिए कुछ दे दो. Give us something. You mighty king. I have never seen a more handsome king. They will follow what is called the policy of appeasement. They like, give us something. We are a small trading company. Give us something. And in this give us something, in which they will massage the ego of the local powers, which I will discuss with you, they will very simply be able to use the situation better. So this is the difference between a private and a public body. That the director of MTNL thinks of him like an IS officer. It is an IS officer only. But the CEO of Airtel and Jio are private individuals. So there is a fundamental difference in how they operated in India. If we understand this point, I want to discuss the charter and then start the story of the English in India. Very interesting story it is, and you will see how the English played a very interesting card in India. Can we talk about the charter and then go and talk about how the British expanded in India? Initial expansion, as it is called. Private joint stock company shareholders have given initial investment. They need to generate profit answerable to the British shareholders. More aggressive, more responsible to Indian politics. Okay. Why English came too late? Trading happens early also. But the problem is there is no crown impulse. Dutch and the English come up the same point of time, the same 10-year period. Portuguese were already there. Okay. Nancy, Danes were, they are not even a footnote. We'll talk about that. Their issue was totally different. Convert everybody in India into Christianity. That is not possible only. There was like, we will bring missionaries, convert everybody. That is not possible. You will be burnt alive in India at this point of time if you talk about conversion. So the Danes, their issue was totally different. They didn't want trade. They want Christians. So that's a separate issue altogether. We'll talk about that. The shares are most, again, Rakesh, you really think that the company which dominated us will have shareholders which are Indian? Logic, basic logic you use. The shareholders were all Britisher. Most of them were actually British parliamentarians. These companies are listed not in India. They are listed in their own countries. So why would they give Indians the same share? Okay, we will loot you and then give that loot back to you as dividend. Think of it like that. That I take it from you, I beat you up, I take 100 rupees from you and then give 100 rupees to you. This is my share as a contribution for your birthday. It makes no sense. That is what you're referring to by thinking that there would be Indian participation as shareholders. Does East India Company not care about monarchy? I'll tell you, there is a little bit of a monarchy here. The monarchy is going to be very, very significant in giving a very important document. Can we talk about that document? Are we clear regarding the nature of the English and the East India Company? Do you now understand what is the fundamental difference here? Because that is a point you need to understand. Can I move forward, everyone? I want everybody onto the same page. Everybody, if we are on the same page, we don't get lost in this process. Okay, now perfect. So the next point which I have to discuss is that this East India Company had one very important advantage up its sleeve. Now tell me one thing. If the East India Company is a private body, then do the British merchants other than the people associated with the East India Company have the right to challenge East India Company in the Indian Ocean? Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, because Tata, when it operates in the car segment, Mahindra can also operate. And for example, there's a tender which has come up in, for example, let's think of it. There's a tender which has come up in Kenya for producing 1 lakh cars. Now, from India, Mahindra and Tata both can fill the tender, right? Can't they? Because both of them are private actors. So be it Mahindra or be it Tata, they can fill in the tender because both are private bodies. And there is equal competition in that regard. So if the East India Company is operating here, then any other, for example, there could be another company which comes up, the real East India Company, the new East India Company. There can be multiple companies which can take this name and come up. Can't it be that case? That can't there be private competition? There can be private competition. That is how capitalism works, or that is how trade works. So I am an East India Company shareholder. I am an East India Company court of director. The last thing which I want, think of it, the last thing which I want is my own country challenging me. If there's a tender in Kenya, Mahindra and Tata have put in a tender And because they are fighting with each other, maybe Hyundai takes it. So isn't it a loss for India? Because neither of our companies got the tender. Is this making sense to you? Is this making sense to you that if we in fight, we could be undercutting the Indian interest? So if the East India Company, after this point, is competing with other Britishers, whilst the Portuguese, the Dutch have only one company there, and if you have multiple British companies and they are competing with only one company from Portuguese and the Dutch, would the competition of the East India Company be effective or be actually in any way successful in India? The answer is very simply no. It's logic. It's logic. And you may have done it in your life also. That in certain situations, because you are going to get you and your brother or sister, you were going to get a very good phone. Both were going to get an iPhone. But because you both fought with each other over it not being 13 and 14 and 15, both of you now have a Redmi phone. Because what you did was you undercut your own interests. You undercut your own interests. But both were getting iPhone 13. Sure, it's a 3-year-old phone, but it was still an iPhone. Now what happens is you say, then go to your mother and say, give her 13, but give me 14 at least. And your sister goes and says, give him 13. And your now parents realize both of you are playing your own game. So they take you to the place, competition happens, and now both of you get a Redmi phone and both of you get zero, nothing. And this is what the British East India Company is in a way open to, which is competition from within. That is the last thing which can happen to the British, and that is the last thing which they want. So now the East India Company Court of Directors plead to the Crown. They plead to the Crown that, okay, you did not give us money. You've not contributed not even one penny, no issues. But now at least give us a royal charter, which is a royal document that makes us the only company to trade in the Indian subcontinent east of the Cape of Good Hope, and no other British trader can trade in this area, only East India Company. We want to challenge the Dutch and the Portuguese, but for that we need a monopoly. We need a monopoly. So the East India Company gets a charter, royal charter from the Crown, which is basically a order. And I'll give you a very simple analogy of this. Imagine that in that tender which is there for Kenya, in which Tata and Mahindra are competing with each other, imagine that the government of India issues an order that any tender west of the Arabian Sea, only Tata can apply. So now can Tata effectively counter Honda and Hyundai? Can it? It can. Because it is now the only player in from the Indian side. It's not that they got it easily, because most of the shareholders were British parliamentarians. It was in their own interest to give the East India Company a monopoly. So the Crown gave them a royal charter, and under the royal charter, 15 years initially, it was basically, it said that between 1600 the East India Company was established, and between 1600 and 1615, initially only 15 years, then it was became indefinite, then 20 years, it was decided that only the East India Company can operate operate east of Cape of Good Hope, and no other trader from Britain can trade in East Indies. Basically, beyond this point, if you had a ship, that ship from the British needed to have two flags. One is the British Union Jack and the other East India Company flag. If you are not an East India Company trader, you cannot operate east of the Cape of Good Hope. This basically gives them a monopoly over Indian and Chinese trade. And under this royal charter, it was also said that certain British Royal Navy and Army assistance can also be provided if needed. Now, basically, the East India Company has now created its context. The East India Company is finally a joint stock company with the exclusive right to trade in India on the behalf of the British and they are a private body answerable to its shareholders, and their monopoly in this sector is because of the charter. Monopoly due to charter. Now, whatever I've said till this point, does anybody have any issue? I've now created an image of the East India Company and why it was what it was. Who are English to issue a charter? There are many other nations who issue it. Again, Gib, you are forgetting one thing. The charter only applies to the British. The Indian government cannot issue an order that Hyundai and Honda cannot compete. The Portuguese and the British, it is only applying to the British. It is basically, the charter does one thing, which is that it eliminates internal competition. The external competition remains. It remains. So, the East India Company is the only sole representative of the British in India. Yes, only English East India Company can trade. No other English company can trade in India. How were the Dutch first? Again, this is the problem. Ashwin, you don't listen. How were the Dutch first when the VOC was established in 1602 and the EIC is established in 1600? I told you that that sequence is according to the first factory. First factory of the Dutch is 1605. First factory of the English is 1613. Now you tell me which comes first, 1605 or 1613. So I leave it to your judgment. I say things, but you don't listen. This is the problem. Don't be distracted. So I know what this was going to be a natural reaction from you. So I already preempted it. So why India not give charter to other company? Ritika, this charter is not given by India. Again, don't do this to me, please. This royal charter is from the British Crown. Yaar, aisa mat karo, please. That why would India give a company its own right to exploit it? If the charter given in 1600, then why Britishers are to wait for 13 years to start trading in India? That is the story, Syam, which I have to tell you. Very good question. Love the question. If, see, by aage ka pucho, that's a good thing. You're asking what is going to happen further. Where we are right now, Are we clear? What is the nature of the East India Company? How is it different vis-a-vis the Portuguese and the Spanish, or Portuguese and the Dutch? And what is the situation? Right? What is the name of the British crown? It was James first. Later, it will become Queen Elizabeth. Then it will become Queen Victoria. Victoria was the one who actually ruled India properly, the Empress of India. But I don't care about the name of the crown. It was James the First who actually made it indefinite. It was given previously for 15 years. Then he will make it indefinite. Then for 20 years. Separate issue altogether. Now, let's do one thing. Let's take a break here, a breather, because the story is long and I don't want to break the flow in between the story. The pretext is done, the context is done. What I need to tell you is now, how did the British initially got a foothold in the Indian subcontinent? Now, EIC situation is same as the VOC. Yes, in a way. But understand this point. EIC is still answerable to the people, but it has an exclusive right. VOC always had an exclusive right, but is not the answerable to the people. Getting my point? You have to send you would have received the feedback form. The SME is sending you that. Please fill it up for, I think, Shyam sir, which is economics. So economics, you have to fill up the feedback form. Okay. If British give the charter, then why didn't he give when the company opened in India? Firstly, this company does not open in India; it opens in Britain. Second is that the charter can only be given once the East India Company is created. The British Crown does not want to create it, so the people create it. And then they plead to the British, the least you can do is that you can give us a charter. Why the company got East India name? Again, Basu must be sleeping, but the point is the west of Cape of Good Hope was called West Indies, and the east of Cape of Good Hope was called East Indies. Indies means that the Indias and the islands. So East India. Okay. Who agreed? Do the traders managerial like company? There is no any Indian indigenous leader. Jaswant, I understand your emotion. The question is not framed the right way, but I understand your emotion. No, there is no Indian leader because there is fragmented polity, which we will discuss tomorrow. But right now, I have to discuss something else with you, which is a question which can come in the examination, is very relevant. Is that how did the British become what they became between 1600 and 1750? Can I take a break here? Please put MCQs in between. Krishna, very good suggestion. Well taken. But why? Why? Is it school? Is it college that you want questions in between? I'm trying to make you understand something theoretical and you want MCQ. Stop this impulse. You will get equal and good opportunity to express yourself through MCQs. Right? Why Dutch and the Portuguese were silent when the English entered? Nobody was silent. They fought. That is the story I, Pavitra, have to tell you. Why is that factory is definitely established in Kochi? Because Kochi was a very important trading center. And you want to be there where your rival is. Crux is company is private owned and charter is given by government. Very well, Manish. Very well summarized. And on this note of Manish, I will give you a small break. 10 minutes. We come back at what? The time is 6:40. We come back at 6:50 and we take this story forward. Okay. Anubhav sir starts class with 5 questions for revision. Very good. But that is polity. This is history. And there you can do that. If you want, I can bring 5 questions for revision. Rather, I give you the whole story again with the timeline, but that is not enough. So stop quoting me what others do because the nature of the subject is different. ये polity नहीं है. This is history. History, you need interconnected stories. So thank you for the suggestion. Taken very well, but it will not be the case. So I will give you equal opportunity and I will look for your name when the leaderboard will be shown. Thank you. I will see you at 6:50. Cool down because the story is a little bit long. I hope we all are fundamentally clear about the pretext. Yes? Done. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Now, we have to start a story here. There are two chronological orders. One is arrival of India at other companies. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, Lakshya. Difference in, as I said, East India Company establishment and coming to India. Now, our story is now about what is called the initial expansion of the British in India. This is what we have to discuss, which is the initial expansion. For that, we need to understand how the British started to interact with the Indian subcontinent. See, the first Britisher to basically come to India properly is a person called Thomas Stevens, who was a Jesuit, reached Cape of Good Hope, and then, with the help of the Portuguese, reached Goa. Kimi, you can do that. However, in 1590, Ralph Finch came to Akbar's court and saw the prosperity of India. And by 1599, John Middlehall wanted to still test the land route, and he came to India via the land route but was not convinced that it was safe enough for the English to operate. And that is why in 1600, Queen Elizabeth I will issue a charter to the East India Company, which was a private company, giving it a 15-year monopoly to trade in eastern sector as the only power representing the British. We've discussed this point already. This should not be a problem for you, and the initial intervention really doesn't matter to us. Now, as soon as the British came to India, now they were basically in odds with the Dutch. They were at odds with the Dutch and the Portuguese. Now, when the British did come to India, they did go to the what we call as the Straits of Malacca. As soon as they reached the Straits of Malacca, the Dutch were very aggressive in removing the English from there. In what is called the Eboyena massacre, the Dutch tortured multiple English merchants and their Japanese navigators to death to say that never look towards Indonesia. Never look towards Indonesia. आंख उठा के भी नहीं देखना है. Because we will literally destroy you in this sector. So the English very quickly realized that going to Indonesia was never the option, because the Dutch were very adamant in controlling the Straits of Malacca. Now, the British could do one thing, which is intervene in the Arabian Sea and take power away from the Portuguese. So, as I told you that the ruler is Jahangir, and in his court, you have a, a Portuguese member, who is Father Pinheiro. And Jahangir is becoming more and more frustrated with the Portuguese. He's becoming more and more frustrated with the Portuguese, that it is basically their intervention in every policy which Jahangir did not like. Now reach two people in Jahangir's court. One is called William Hawkins and the other one called Thomas Roe. So the English and the Dutch can't basically operate together, which you can see here. Just to repeat what it is, the English rose as a challenge to the Dutch, but the point is that the Dutch were very quick to capture the Portuguese sector, and in the Eboyana massacre in Indonesia, the Dutch made it a point to say to the English that you cannot operate in Indonesia. So the Dutch angle is very clear that the Dutch don't want the English to intervene in Indonesia. So the only thing which the British can do is basically play with Portuguese sentiments and Portuguese power. So now Father Pinheiro has become basically a major problem for Jahangir, and Jahangir is looking for alternatives to the Dutch, to the Portuguese. Now William Hawkins and Thomas Roe will reach Jahangir's court, and Pinheiro literally did not want Hawkins to meet and Thomas Roe to meet Jahangir. He did anything, everything, every tantrum he could show and throw, he did it. He literally wanted no one to reach Jahangir. But the English were very good in appeasement. They will go with a globe saying that you are Jahangir and this is the Jahan. And when I will teach you art and culture, I will show you how Jahangir got obsessed with the globe. They will take spectacles, they will take an hourglass, they will give very interesting gifts to Jahangir. And Jahangir got very impressed. And Jahangir was now looking at the English as an alternative to the Portuguese presence in his court. However, the English had to prove that they were good enough, that they could actually challenge the Portuguese in India. And that is why in 1611, 1612, and in 1610, but specifically in 1611 and 12, after constant appeasement of Jahangir, the English show their power to Jahangir, which is in 1611 and 12, the Portuguese will be defeated by the English in the Arabian Sea. And this will basically impress Jahangir even more. This will impress Jahangir even more that, okay, they are a viable power to challenge the Portuguese presence in the Arabian Sea. So see how basically Jahangir is drinking one poison to kill the other poison. The Portuguese are one poison which is killing Jahangir. But he is basically drinking another poison as an alternative to the Portuguese, not knowing that the English are even bigger problem than Portuguese in that regard. And based on all of these politics and the English showing their power, finally the English say to Jahangir, give us the permission to trade in one of the most prosperous and the stronghold of the Mughals. In 1613, Jahangir will grant permission to the English to set up factory in Surat. Surat was a Mughal port, and Surat at this point of time had the highest volume of trade of any port in the Arabian Sea. And the English finally get their first factory through is what is called the Jahangir Farman. Farman means order. It's called Jahangir Farman. 1613 in that sense is seen as a watershed because now the British have established themselves in the heart of Mughal trade. So just to repeat the story for you, 1608 Hawkins will go to Jahangir's court, but the Portuguese will create pressure and will not allow Hawkins to interact with Jahangir too much. 1609 When now the English are becoming more aggressive, King James the First, as I told you, will renew the charter just just 8 years into the charter itself, indefinitely, that you have a monopoly forever. And in 1611 and 1612, between this period of 1611 and 15, the Portuguese will be defeated at Bombay by Captain Middleton, at the Swali sector near Surat by Captain Best. And this will lead to Jahangir issuing a farman which will allow Thomas Adelworth to develop the first English colony in India, which is at Surat. So in our timeline, these internal politics don't matter, but these two dates matter. 1600, 1613, which is establishment of East India Company, first factory at Surat. Anybody has any issue in understanding how the British earned their first factory, not in central India, not in South India, but in the most important port of India at this point of time in the Arabian Sea, which is Surat? Does anybody understand this, that between this, the English display to Jahangir their power against Portuguese? That is in 1611 and 1612. But they are not important for our main story. Company is the company, factory is a warehouse. Now, are we clear about this much? 1600 is not the time of decline. 1600 is the time of Portuguese decline. That is why Dutch and English will come at the same point of time. Okay. Now, Jahangir was further persuaded by the English through their diplomacy, through their appeasement. A lot of gifts were given by the English between 1613 and 15 to then receive the second farman. This is the first farman of these are both what are called Jahangir farmans. The second farman now expands the British power. The English are allowed to trade in brooch, which is nothing but further in the Surat sector, in the Gujarat sector, in Mauslipatnam, in Ahmedabad, in Agra, and for the first time limited access to Bengal. So the British East India Company will be established in 1600, but they will become a territory. They will have their first two factories. First factory in Surat in 1613, and their second presence or second set of factories at Mauslipatnam, Broch, Ahmedabad, Agra, and Bengal via the Jahangir Farman. Basically, the first intervention or foot into the Indian subcontinent is Jahangir's Farman. And you have to remember the dates 16, 13, and 15. All by showing to Jahangir that Portuguese are useless. Machilipatnam is the new name, Mauslipatnam was the old name. Are we clear about these three dates? Because as I told you, this will become more and more complex because this is just the beginning. This is how, see, the Portuguese got their breakthrough at Kochi. The Dutch got their breakthrough at Mauslipatnam. But what they did was that they actually contacted local rulers. But the English did the other way around. They went straight away to the Mughal emperor, appeased him, and got orders. Basically, when they when the British reach Mauchlypatnam, they come up with an order saying that this is no one else but Jahangir who has said that we can establish a factory. So the first set of factories and presence in India is because of Jahangir's Farman. Now, this is how they have, in a way, got both the eastern and the western sector. But right now, the most valuable port for the British is the Surat sector or Surat itself. Can I take the story forward? Can I take the story forward now? I will give you a summary in the end. Don't worry. Just play along. Just enjoy the story. But it is important to understand these moments because they are generally very, very critical for writing a mains answer. Okay. Now, in 1632, the British were operating in peninsular India, and there used to be a state which used to exist, a regional kingdom which is called Golkunda. You would have known Golkunda, Berar, Bijapur, Ahmednagar. These are the sectors which exist in this area. But Golkunda is a very important state which exists here. And Mauchlypatnam is very close to Golkunda. Now, the British used to import a lot of commodities and export from this sector. And the aspect was to penetrate into the parts of Golkunda via this port. Now, the Golkunda ruler, the Golkunda state applied certain amount of taxes and custom duty on the Britishers. Basically, if you want to trade with the Golkunda rulers, you have to pay a certain duty. Let's take an example that for 2 tons of import and export, they used to pay close to 500 pagodas. Pagodas is the currency, is the local currency in this area, which is basically 500 silver coins. 500 silver coins. Silver coins. Okay. Again, Sonia, which book are you referring to? English opened the first factory in South at Mauchlypatnam in 1611. No, that is not true. That is not true. 1613 is the first one, which is in Surat. So I don't know which book you are talking about, but it has to be 1613 Surat. Forget about it, Sonia. Forget about it. 1613. Trust what I am telling you because it is out of not books random, but much more optional level and academic books. So whatever timeline I'm giving you is the right timeline. Okay. Now, for the British, this is an annoyance that for 2 tons of import export, they have to pay 500 silver coins to the ruler. And basically, this is upon tonnage. It is on volume, how much you pay as taxes. Standard thing. Now, the British come up with a very interesting idea. And the interesting idea is that they wanted to increase volume. But if they increase volume, what goes up? If they increase the volume of trade in this area, the taxes go up. Very good, very good, very good. Now thinking like a Britisher, so they have to pay a bigger payment. Now what they do is that they appease the Golkunda ruler. I am not going to give you his name because it doesn't really matter. Now the Golkunda ruler, they appease. They say that we have a very interesting scheme for you. And the British say to the Golkunda ruler, see, either way, you are going to get 500 pagodas from us. because the British showed them the data that we have given you 500 pagodas in the past 2 to 3 years. Let's do one thing. I am going to give you 500 pagodas in the end of the year. Rather, I'll give it to you right now itself. Which is that you upfront take 500 pagodas from me, but then you exempt me from any other taxes thereafter. I am ready to give you annually 500 pagodas in the beginning of the year, and thereafter you will exempt me from any taxes further till the next annual payment. Now, basically, the Golconda ruler forgets one major thing here. That 500 pagoda is because of how much tonnage? Is because of how much tonnage? 2 tons. Now, he thinks, very good deal. And this is the myopic vision of these rulers, that they say, okay, this person, he's giving me money upfront. Right now, he's giving me. And he says, okay, perfect. You give me 500 pagodas right now, and you are exempted from trade. I give you a farman for this. But this dumb ruler forgot that as soon as this farman, which is very aptly called the Golden Farman, which was issued by the Golconda ruler, as soon as the Golconda ruler gives the Golden Farman to the British that yes, for 500 pagodas annually, you can trade for free thereafter, he forgot about one thing, that the British will exponentially increase the tonnage. So 2 tons they used to give 500 pagodas. Now thereafter, the British increased it to 15-20 tons, and they were still paying 500 pagoda. And this is how now the British have, in a way, their eagerness to trade vis-a-vis the Dutch and the Portuguese, who were standard, who were happy to have their small forts. The Golconda ruler has given the British an opportunity to penetrate more in this sector. And very simply, this farman is called the first major breakthrough which the British get on the eastern coast. See, I'll give you a very simple example of this. That you go to your college canteen. You every day have breakfast. You'll have one sandwich and one tea or coffee. Your bill is close to 30 or 40 rupees per day. So over a period of time, you always give the canteen 600 to 1000 rupees. So you go to that person and say that, see, either way, I will give you 1000 rupees. So take this 1000 right now. But I don't want to give this money every day. This is the 1000. I will, as it is, eat this much amount every day. Take the 1000. Take the 1000. Now, if I'm not very good in maths, I will not realize one thing, which is previously I only used to eat a sandwich and a chai. Thereafter, as soon as he will accept that 1000 rupees, I will start to eat more because I've already paid. So when something is becoming free for you after a point, you will start to overexploit it, which is basically what the British will start to do in this sector. So the Golconda ruler basically sold off this sector for mere 500 pagodas. So the Golden Farman stated, on payment of 500 pagodas annually, the British will trade freely, duty free in the Golconda sector. You must have done this also. You would have done it, for example, in bus passes. You take you take ticket every day. You will only take that bus once, but you buy a pass and you will unnecessarily take the bus everywhere, because you will try to make sure that you get more out of that pass. So same way, the British have got a golden opportunity wherein a local ruler has given them, this is indefinite. This farman is indefinite on the pretext that every year 500 pagodas should reach to the table of that king. Understand this point. It's an annual arrangement under which 500 pagodas will be given by the British every day, every year, and they will trade freely. They will trade freely. So it's called the Golden Farman of the Golconda ruler. And you see how the British are basically playing with our rulers. And our rulers, in their basic egos and their myopic vision, they are not able to understand what is basically happening. See, it's not that the Golconda rulers are not good in mathematics. They think British are white man, what will he do? क्या कर लेगा? दादा क्या कर लेगा? I am the Golconda ruler. I would have not taken anything. You are giving me 500 pagodas, that is enough. When you are egotistic, when you are a ruler, you do foolish things because you want to project power. In Jahangir's court and in Golconda court, most of the courts in the Indian subcontinent, the English were literally laughed upon. And the reason I'll tell you why, which is basically not correct, but they were laughed upon over the fact that they used to say, who do you represent? They used to say Queen Elizabeth. They say Queen Elizabeth, meaning woman. They said yes. They said this guy reports to a woman. They used to laugh it off. In Jahangir's court, it is documented that the British, with their tights and that whole white thing which they wear around their neck, they used to say, what type of clothes do you wear? Don't you know what type of clothes are there in India? And they used to say, this person reports to the queen. This is the patriarchal mindset which is there in the Indian subcontinent, because the Mughals generally did not have any, or did not generally, after Razia, there was no ruler who was a woman. So the English were literally laughed upon. So they were like, Golconda ruler said, 500 pagodas, more than enough, give this person. What will he do? This is the attitude which the Indian rulers have. Literally short-term myopic vision. They didn't see, he would have known that maybe the tonnage will increase. But now the prediction could not have been that the tonnage will go from 2 to 10 tons. And as it is, you tell me which monarchical ruler basically consults his foreign minister and then goes to the port to see, okay, this is 2 tonnage which is coming and then it is going. You really think that the Golconda ruler really cared? It's a blunder on his part, but you see, something much bigger is going to happen very soon in 1651. So if you understand why it is called the Golden Farman, can I go to the next major development which comes to the British, which is 1639? Are you understanding the purpose of this discussion? I am telling you how one by one the British is capturing power in India. The type of question which comes from this topic, Shubham, is discuss, for example, I'll give you a question already and you see how I'm answering it. The question is, the initial expansion of the British in India was not through force, but through concessions. Comment. This is the question. And this is the concession which we are talking about. Listen to the question again. under quotes, the British expansion in India, it's a real question. The British expansion in India, initial expansion in India, was not based on force, but based on concessions. Are you understanding this? Megha, they were fools to underestimate the same woman is going to rule, become the empress of India. That's a separate issue altogether. But the point is that that is their mindset. You can't blame them for that. But now are you getting the concessions? Jahangir Farman, Golconda. For Jahangir Farman, Golden Farman. Can I go to 1639 and 51? Very good. Perfect. Now, in 1639, a person called Francis Day, his name is Francis Day, a person called Francis Day will go to what is called today the Tamil Nadu sector near Madras, which is basically Chennai. And there used to be a ruler which used to rule there, which is called the ruler of Chandragiri. Again, you are seeing one thing. I am strategically not giving you the name of the rulers because it is already information loaded area. So I'm not trying to give you unnecessary information because you gain nothing out of writing the name of the ruler. Now, the ruler of Chandragiri, Francis Day, goes to Chandragiri. Ruler, see, the British have Mauchlypatnam. But what is the problem with Mauchlypatnam? What is the problem with Mauchlypatnam? They are there in Mauchlypatnam. But what is the problem in Mauchlypatnam? Having a factory in Mauchlypatnam. What is the issue? The problem is Dutch presence. Very good. The Dutch are still there. Now Francis Day goes to the Chandragiri ruler. And he says to the Chandragiri ruler that you almighty Chandragiri ruler, I have never seen such a court, not very powerful, used to rule over only 50, 60, 70 kilometers. But he said, such a big empire, such a handsome ruler, never ever seen such grandeur, never ever seen such hospitality rather. And he says, we are very, very small trading company called the East India Company. You would have heard about us. If not, हम ना चीज को कौन जानता है? We are a very small contenders. You may know about the Dutch, you may know about the Portuguese. We are very small. Give us a tract of land near Madras. We want to set up a factory and we will be happy to pay you rent. You give us some amount of land in and around Madras and we will be happy to pay you rent. And we will be forever indebted to you, you almighty king. This is how the British basically were sweet poison. They used to appease the ruler like anything. Multiple gifts, multiple forms of luxury items are taken, and the English would say, please, just give us, they beg literally, kuch to de do, little bit. We will give you rent, whatever you want, we will give you rent. And here again, the Chandragiri ruler, in his foolishness, grants what is called the Chandragiri Farman or the Chandragiri concession, under which Madras was handed over to the British at a very nominal rent, which is Chennai is handed over to the British at a very nominal rent. And the British, as soon as that happens, in 1639, they will shift their eastern headquarters from Mauchlypatnam to Madras. And they will build a fort there also, which is called Fort St. George, where today the Vidhan Sabha of Tamil Nadu sits. That is called Fort St. George. So it's a small area, but a very significant area. This is very significant because now the British can independently operate in South India away from Portuguese and Dutch presence. So the Chandragiri concession is again considered a major blunder by the Chandragiri ruler. They used to pay close to, it is believed that they were paying £100 annually for Madras, Chennai. And imagine how important Chennai was to them. So Chennai will become, I will use the word Madras because that is the word it should be used. Madras will become the eastern headquarter, and till the British would not leave India, Madras will remain a very important sector for the English in this area. So you can see, from begging to crying, the English are doing anything to get access to the Indian subcontinent. But the biggest blunder is not done by Chandragiri or Golconda. We all are on the same page. We are now going to go to Bengal. Are we all on the same page? Very good. Now the biggest concession will come to them in 1651. Will be 1651. And in 1651, they will go to Bengal. Bengal used to have a governor. His name was Shah Shuja. Shah Shuja is basically the brother of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb, Shah Shuja, and Dara Shikoh are the three sons of Shah Jahan, major three sons of Shah Jahan. And he had two daughters also, Roshanara and Jahanara. So Shah Shuja is basically the son of Shah Jahan and the brother of Aurangzeb. And the British will be really interested in Bengal for one reason, which is because the British wanted Bengal to get certain concessions, because 80 to 90% of all eastern trade used to happen via Hooghly. Via Hooghly. Calcutta, which is today Calcutta, but Hooghly River and Hooghly sector was 80 to 90% of all eastern trade of the British. So now again, the British want somehow to get a concession like the Golden Farman here. And here again, Shah Shuja will give a major concession to the British in the form of what is called as the Shah Shuja Farman. In 1651, the Bengal governor gave the British the right to trade in Bengal freely, duty free, in return of, or in return, or rather on payment of on payment of 3,000 rupiah per annum. Now here again, basically, Shah Shuja did not get the point what the British were going to do after they give that 3,000. See, to give you a perspective, just to give you a perspective, because 3,000 rupiah is the same. There used to be what is called dinar, rupiah, and dam. Dam is copper coin. Rupiah is silver coin. It's basically silver coin. The word rupee comes out of this only. Started by Sher Suri, later taken by the Mughals forward. Rupiah, but we use the word, not rupees, the word rupee, rupiah. The word comes like this. The gold coin is called sunhera. It shines. And the word is rupehla, which has less shine. So rupaya, rupehla, the etymology of that word. But Just to give you a perspective, because 3000 seems to be very less, because you and me think it is 3000. With 3000 what comes? Nothing. But equivalent amount, and let's do a certain type of exercise. What is the silver rate today? Just Google it and tell me. What is the silver rate today? For 1 kg silver, what is the rate for silver today? Somebody saying 65,000. I Google it. I'm not asking you to guess it. 73,600, 76,200. Everybody is giving me a different. Let's take it round figure 70,000. कोई बात नहीं. 70,000. 70,000 rupees per kg of silver. You're telling me kg of silver, right? This is the rate of kg of silver. Now imagine that it is 3,000 rupiah, means 3,000 silver coins. 3,000 silver coins. And one silver coin could be close to 100 grams. Could be close to 100 grams. Hypothetically, it used to be that much only. So if 3,000, if one coin is 3,000 is 100 grams, how many coins is going to be 1 kg? How many coins is going to be 1 kg? 100 grams. 10 coins is going to be 10 coins is going to be 1 kg. So total kg of coins in 3,000 coins is how much? 300 kg. Very good. Multiply 300 with 70,000. You get somebody is writing 21 lakhs, somebody is writing 21 crores, somebody is writing 2 crores. It would be how much? 2 crores 10 lakhs. Yes, 2.1 crore. Now, is 2.1 crore a big amount? You tell me. Is 2.1 crore a big amount? Yes. Now, why am I doing this exercise? Because 3,000 rupees sounds very less. But the British are giving a very big amount equivalent to today, which is 2.1 crores annually for trading. Doesn't matter, 10 grams 70, so it becomes 21 crores. Doesn't matter. It's not a CSAT class. I'm giving you a feel of it, that if you calculate it, it is a very big amount. So it's not that the British are basically paying a sell-off, that they're paying only 100 coins. It's 3,000 coins is a lot of coins. Now the point is, but the tonnage which they will take out is enormous. If today I tell you that you can trade on the Surat port for 21 crores annually, every capitalist, every industrialist in this nation is going to fight to get that right. Because the amount of tax which that person is going to pay is going to be very high for 100, 200 tons. So what Shah Shuja is doing is not in a way very prima facie problematic. But he cannot predict what the British will do after they get this farman. I'm trying to understand with you that these rulers are not that dumb. These rulers are doing a concession. That is, in a way, a thing which they are doing as rulers. But they don't have the historical understanding to know, or they don't have the luxury of sitting in 2023 to know what the British were going to do thereafter. It's a short-term, myopic vision of politics, and that is what is the problem in India right now. So from what we've done till this point is 1613, 1600, 1615, 1632, 1639, 1651. Does anybody have any issue in understanding establishment, Jahangir Farman, Golden Farman, Chandragiri concession, and 1651, which is Shah Shuja Farman. Yes, that is Lakshay. That is not going to happen right now. Later, you will see. You will see. Anybody has any issue in understanding these dates and all, don't worry. I will give you a way of consolidation. I want you to understand what I'm telling you. Because if you understand it, you will never forget it and you don't have to learn it. So 1639 is Chandragiri Farman getting Madras by appeasing the ruler. 1632 is Golden Farman. This is 500. This is 3000. That's it. That is it. Jahangir Farmans is giving access to Surat, and 1615 is giving access to Broach, Ahmedabad, Moslipatam, Bengal, and Agra. So very simply, 1600 is the establishment of the East India Company. 1613 they get their first colony, first factory. 1615 they get access to internal parts of India. 1632, 39, 51 are a series of concessions they've got. The economic crisis has not fully pushed in. Economic crisis will come after 1670, 1665, that period, later part of 1600. 1651 is Shah Shuja, the governor of Bengal, giving the British the right to trade in Bengal for free for 3000 rupees. I will consolidate all of this for you through the PPT so that we remember it better. 1632, the English got the Golden Farman from the Sultan of Golconda. For 500 pagodas a year, they earned the right to trade on this port freely. 1639, Francis Day obtained Chennai or Madras from ruler of Chandragiri, wherein Francis Day was the member of the Moslipatam Council established by the British. He will go to the Chandragiri ruler, plead for an area, and when they will get that area, they will establish Fort George or Fort St. George, and Moslipatam will be replaced as the headquarters of Eastern trade as Madras. 1640, they will build this fort. Thereafter, this I have to discuss with you. Thereafter, already 1615, the Portuguese were removed by the English from the Jahangir's court. That was the first farman they got. 1613, 1615 is testament to that, giving them access to Surat and then later giving them access to Agra, Ahmedabad, Broach, and Moslipatam. But the biggest concession came in 1651 when the English established their first factory in Bengal, and whilst doing that, they got privilege to trade freely at the payment of 3000 rupees per annum. Chandragiri is not in Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh and Chandragiri, there is a way it comes out of my mouth. Chhattisgarh, Chandragiri. So Chandragiri is in Tamil Nadu, not in Chhattisgarh. So very simply, we have covered these basic areas. Nishan means that it is the royal mark which is on the farman itself. Pagoda value is equally similar. Name of the ruler is not important for the examination. Doesn't really matter. Where there is, I will tell you. Are we clear with regards to the first set of concepts? Because then I have to add 1661, 68, and then major 1689, 90, and 1717. This is the story which is left. Now, in 1661, the East India Company get a lottery. Gold is dinar. Different words have been used. Dinar is the word for gold. In 1661, they get a lottery. See, the Portuguese were under the domination of the Spanish during the 1600s, 1620s, 1630s onwards. And in order to remove the Spanish control over Portugal, the Portuguese wanted help from the English. So when you will do world history with me, I will tell you that there are no permanent enemies and there are no permanent allies in world history or in world politics because it's all self-interest. So the same powers fighting in India were now trying to help each other. So England is going to help the Portuguese remove the Spanish control, and Portugal will again become a independent country. It will be called the Iberian Union, which will break after the Portuguese come out of it. But now, in process of doing this, the English and the Portuguese came closer, and they wanted to cement this relationship through a marriage, which is the marriage between a Portuguese queen, in her name Catherine of Braganza, and Catherine Braganza was now going to marry King Charles II. Her marriage was going to happen to King Charles II of Britain. Now, basically, King Charles II never liked Braganza, but it's a strategic alliance. As all marriages in companies, it is a matrimonial alliance. So now the Portuguese were so happy that Catherine of Braganza was getting married that these foolish, whatever you want to call them, these dumb, foolish Portuguese will give a lottery to the British, which will be handed over to the East India Company by 1668. In this marriage, as dowry, the British will receive Bombay as a settlement. So basically, the word Bombay is actually a Portuguese word. Bom means good, bay means bay. It's called Bombay, which is good way. Bombay was a major thing which the British got as a settlement, as a dowry. So the the transfer of this land is in 1661, will be completed by 1662. But mostly some books quote the wrong date. It is not 1662, it is 1661. 1661, I've seen the marriage document in the Mumbai archives, Elphinstone College archives, and it exactly says, I have a photocopy of it also, it is 1661. 1661, there's a document which the Portuguese crown writes, which is that in return of this marriage as dowry, we give you Bombay. Now, Bombay was never given a lot of heed or lot of attention by the British, by the Portuguese. They thought it's too swampy, and most of Bombay was underwater. But see, what would be the crown do with the Bombay? Because they don't live there. So the crown in 1668, the crown will hand over Bombay as a rented property to the East India Company for £10 annual rent. You give us £10 and you take this area. What is Bombay? Mumbai. So basically, in 1668, the British got Bombay. And now what they will do is, they will shift their headquarters. From Surat to Bombay. So now you have Madras and they have Bombay. And Bombay, what they will start to do is reclaim the land out of the waters. And that is why as soon as it rains in Bombay, it goes underwater. Because most of Bombay was basically taken out of water by reclaiming land. Simple point is, Catherine Braganza is marrying Charles II, and in dowry, Portuguese are giving the British Bombay. They take it and they give it to the East India Company by 1668. So you can see that by 1668, the British have now two permanent and independent zones in which they can operate freely. This is not an Indian concession, but this is the lucky, fortunate, what we call as coincidence, which happens to the British. How did the Portuguese have authority over Bombay? They, in the that Dew Basin sector, they captured that area. Bombay, nobody really cared about this at this point of time. Very marshy, useless area vis-a-vis agriculture or anything else. So basically, Bombay was taken when Basin was taken. The Portuguese had control for close to now 161 years. They used to control this area, but or at least 100 years they were controlling Basin or Bombay sector, but they never did anything about it. This is why I tell you that the Portuguese were basically dumb. So does Bombay used to belong to Charles II? Charles II owns it. He rents it out to the East India Company for £10. That is a very nominal. And it's basically giving. Imagine giving Calcutta for 1 paisa as the rent. It's basically like in government of India gets a small port in Sri Lanka, and India would not do anything with, or the prime minister can't do anything with that port. So they give it to the Tatas to develop, and the Tatas just have to pay 100 rupees as rent per month or per annually. You get the analogy that why is Bombay getting Bombay is a fortunate coincidence which happens to them. Yes? Okay. So Bombay was gifted to King Charles II in the dowry of the marriage between Charles and Catherine in 1661-62. So 1662 the transfer happens, 1661 marriage, and by 1662 they have control. Now in 1668 the British East India Company gets this on an annual payment of £10, and now Bombay becomes the headquarter, and moving away from Mughal oversight, from Surat, Bombay becomes the western headquarters of the British. So very simply, the British East India Company is fortunately getting a lot of things. Again, Saloni, for a brief period, it will go away and it will come back as a 20-year concept. The 20-year thing of a charter is after the Glorious Revolution. Okay. Now, amongst all of this, the British were also able to take certain areas from Shah Shuja in the form of what is called Sunoti, Calicut, and Govindpuri, which they will develop as the Calcutta, which is today, which is basically the British taking three villages together and developing their most important fort, which is called Fort William. But the simple point I'm trying to argue is, because now I will go into a very important discussion. From 1613 to 1615, I will give you a timeline, I will give you a table, I will give you everything. Just have to be patient. Keep on following the story. I told you the story is actually long. 1613, 1615, 1632, 1639, 1651, 1668. The British have got a lottery in the form of Bombay. Now something very significant is going to happen. Can I discuss this? Because between 1668 and 1680, the British are now using these farmans to trade in India. Can I now shift to the last discussion we need to have, and then the 1717 farman, which is called the Farrukhsiyar farman? Yes? Okay. Now, see, everybody knows that 1668 to 1680, yes, we will discuss Rajput Jats tomorrow. 1668 to 1680, British are misusing their power. The British are misusing their power. Would that be an exaggeration to say that they're misusing their farmans of 1632, 1651, and they're basically doing indiscriminate trade in the Calcutta sector and in the Golconda sector? This would be a right assessment of the British as a trading. Now, the most unlikeliest of persons will start to notice it and develop a hate towards the English. And that person was Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb could see when he had an economic crisis. So he was trying to do the math and he was able to realize that the British are misusing their farmans. And Aurangzeb actually was the only ruler at this point of time who understood the politics of the British and also understood the way the British were operating in India. And that is why after 1680 to 89, there's a conflict which develops between Aurangzeb and the British. Aurangzeb started to ask questions and the British did not have answers. And in a major moment in 1689, what happens is the Aurangzeb says something, they say, Aurangzeb asks a certain restriction on trade, and the British retaliate by having a small conflict near Fort William. Not Fort William was not there, but near that area. And the British boats or the British East India Company boat harasses certain Hajj travelers who were basically going to go from Hooghly to the Hajj. Now, Aurangzeb was not going to take this very lightly. And what happens is that between 1689 and 90, Aurangzeb seizes all the settlements of the British. He takes the Bengal sector, he seizes Mauchlypatnam, he is able to even take the Chandragiri sector, he says no presence in Surat, and basically he takes most of the privileges away. Golden Farman is takes, he says, I don't believe in Golden Farman. The Shah Farman is actually withdrawn. This was a major moment in Indian history because if Aurangzeb stood by it, maybe India would never have got colonized. Because what the British will do is that if British lose all their settlements in one go, what will the British do? Imagine, think like a Britisher and tell me what would be the British response here. What would be the British response here? Very good. They basically started to, they will never revolt. They know Aurangzeb is too powerful. They basically became, literally started to beg Aurangzeb that give us these settlements back. गलती हो गई, माफ कर दो. It was a mistake. We were in the heat of the moment. We are extremely sorry. We want this back. We want this back. And now they will basically do something which Aurangzeb, and this will connect with Mughal decline. Aurangzeb will be offered 1.5 lakh rupiah, 1.5 lakh coins, silver coins, in return of these settlements. And now you tell me, was Aurangzeb in a position by 1691 to deny it or not take it? No. This is why I taught you Mughal decline. There is an economic crisis and Aurangzeb needs the money. And if 3,000 rupiah, imagine 3,000 rupiah was 2 crore according to your calculation, whatever it may be. Imagine how much 1.5 lakh silver coins would have been. So basically, in 1691, Aurangzeb is going to return the settlements to the British. And this may have been the last moment in which somebody could have saved the Indian subcontinent. There will be other moments also. The first major instance. And Aurangzeb could have been the savior of the Indian subcontinent from colonialism, but that is not going to happen. So very simply, in 1686, English will start to basically become aggressive against Aurangzeb and declare war against Aurangzeb. 87, the Mughals will retaliate by capturing all English settlements. In 88-89, under John Child, the British seized Mughal ships and harassed Hajj pilgrimage. Mughals captured all factories all over the empire, Bombay, Surat, Mosli And now when the British will understand that fighting with Aurangzeb is not the solution, he will be offered 1.5 lakh rupiah as compensation. And in 1690, Aurangzeb is going to pardon the British. And in 1691, Aurangzeb is going to return all the farmans back and restore the power of the British in the Indian subcontinent via his pardon and his reasserting, or what we call as restatement of the Shah Shuja Farman. So very simply, Aurangzeb was in a money crunch, and between 1686 and 1689, he went into a conflict with the Mughals. Again, Yashika, I'm literally telling you what happened between 1680 and 89, which is the Mughals under Aurangzeb went into a conflict with the British. The Mughals captured English settlements in retaliation to the aggression of the British at this point of time, and the British literally bribed or paid off Aurangzeb to get their settlements back. This is a major moment, and this may be a major turning point in Indian history. Sham, don't worry. Dates you will remember after revision. Understand the story. Now, can I just tell you the last major farman, which will literally sell off India, and that it made sure that the British were not going anywhere? Now, I hope you realize one thing. None of these attempts, or none such attempts, were made by the Portuguese and the Dutch. They were too engrossed by their own governmental power that actually they would do something like this. It's literally the English who are desperate to get something out of India that they're doing this in that regard. So, did Aurangzeb increase the annual rates? No, exact 3,000. Aurangzeb so far, why didn't he do anything against the English people? He did, but he was fed money into his mouth. If Aurangzeb would not have been in a crisis, maybe he would not have taken that money. But as Shiva is calculating, I go with his calculation. He is calculating that 1.5 lakh rupiah would have been 1 billion today, which is a very big amount. So Nancy will talk about the Rajput rulers, separate issue, when we'll talk about regional kingdoms. And all of this, Prerna, that's a good question. All of this is done by a private company. Imagine the Tatas doing all of this in England. It's a private company. Now, the British go under the radar. They don't want to literally do anything. 1691, they got pardoned. They will basically silently do everything what they're doing. Now, 1707, Aurangzeb will die. Aurangzeb will die. Now the British will look for an opportunity. They will look for a ruler who was dumb enough to do something very big. Bahadur Shah and Jahandar Shah basically were too unstable to do anything. And finally, in 1717, they will cross roads with Farrukh Siyar. Now you get it? Baja Farmu. Why did I tell you? Because I don't tell you that Baja Farmu, you don't know who is Farrukh Siyar. So Farrukh Siyar will be appeased, will be given a lot of money, and in return of money, he will give what is called the 1717 Farrukh Siyar Farman. Yes, all of this is happening simultaneously, Kanchan. This is the magic. Agra, this is how it is happening. See, everything is coming together. Whatever I'm doing is doing for a purpose. It is all coming together in that regard. I was talking about Mughal decline. I talked about the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the English, and all of this is coming together. These two stories are converging in that sense. So Farooq Siyar gives a farman which is called the Farooq Siyar Farman. And when I will show you the provisions of the Farooq Siyar Farman, you will literally want to go and suffocate Farooq Siyar. Because Farooq Siyar Farman is very ominously called the Magna Carta of the British in India. See, you would know that the British don't have a written constitution. What they have are traditions and concepts, all named as Magna Carta. Magna Carta is their constitution, but not a written constitution. So that is their constitution there. It is believed that the constitution of the British in India, the significance of this Farman is that it acts like the single most important document which allowed the British to operate in India. Symbolically, it's called the Magna Carta of the British in India. Now you see the provisions. The first provision is, in Bengal, export import no additional charge for 3,000. This is not something new. He's restated this in this. But this fool will extend it to Surat. He will say 3,000 idhar de do, 10,000 udhar de do. That for 10,000 rupees you take the same rights in Surat also. And Surat is a very big port at this point of time. Then he says that in the Hyderabad sector, the company can retain the existing privileges and be free of all duties for the rent which they are giving for Madras, which is that you are giving us a rent for Madras via the Chandragiri concession. You give us that rent and you can trade freely also. So now they're saying, give us that rent and you can trade freely. So now they've extended the same thing which was in Bengal into Surat and into Hyderabad. Thereafter, the company was said that you can buy land around Calcutta and expand Calcutta. If you want, you can make your Calcutta settlement bigger. Now, the two biggest blunders. The first was that the company was allowed to extend all these privileges to a person via a dastak. Dastak is basically a transferable pass. That if the British can trade freely, the British can then write it down. And imagine, it's a private company. I'm a trader, I'm an Indian trader. I want to trade with the same privilege which the English have. I can go to the East India Company. East India Company will write, I give you the power to trade in the name of the East India Company. Now tell me one thing. Does a private company have political power? Or does it have sovereignty? No. Farooq Siyar, Jahangir, Shah Shuja, Aurangzeb, all are giving farmans on the basis of the fact that they have sovereignty. However, Dastak gives or extends that sovereign right to a East India Company or a company. And if that is not enough, you see this. The company can issue coins at Bombay which will have the same value as Mughal currency, and they can spread it through the Mughal Empire. Basically, Reliance and Tata can print their own money, and that money on which you will have Ratan Tata will have exactly the same value as the 100 or 500 rupee note which the government of India is printing. This is called an sovereignty overreach. How can you give a private East India Company, a joint stock company, the power to extend the sovereign right of a emperor, give it to someone else through the dastak, and also give them the right to mint money. This is called the Magna Carta, because this makes the British, in a way, the most powerful European power vis-a-vis the Portuguese and the Dutch. किमी 1717 not 1715 स्पेक्ट्रम गलत दिया हुआ है, कोई बात नहीं, कोई बात, राजीव अहिर, नो, लीव इट, 1717. So Farooq Siyar has extended the same concept from Bengal to Surat to Hyderabad. He's done two major things, which is give the British the right to mint their own money and spread it through the Mughal Empire, have the same currency value. Basically, it's a legal denomination according to the Mughals. And also, the company can issue dastaks for extending the rights which they have to someone else. Please understand, I'll tell you. I give you my mobile number. That is my sovereign right to give you my mobile number. You have the right to call me. This is an exclusive right which you and me have, for example. However, I can tell you later that you can give this mobile number as per your discretion to anyone else if they need it. So the thing which you will use to give my mobile number to someone else will be the dastak. Now does it make sense? Now is it making sense? Right? So see, Lakshay, it's about getting silver, and it's not about silver and gold. The point is, you can't give the right to mint, which is a Mughal emperor's right, to a private company. Sure, they have to get the silver and gold. That is a strategic move, maybe. But please understand, Dutch and Portuguese were they were kingdoms. Basically, they were ruled by the crown. This is a private company having so much power. And this right will be passed. Shweta, this dastak is going to be that one lollipop which will be given to two very major traitors of the Indian subcontinent in the Plassey, and that is going to be very important. Jagat Seth and Omi Chand and Amir Chand wanted this dastak from the British, and that is what Clive offered to them. That I will give you the dastak, you help me in defeating Sirajuddaulah, which I will discuss with you later when we'll talk about the conflict in Bengal. But can I, this is the end of the English story. Can I talk about the Danes, the French, close the story and summarize everything? I have given you 1613, 1615, 1632, 1639, 1630, 39, 51. Thereafter 1691, 1691, 1717. In between 1668. These are the dates which are there. I will give you everything. I will give you everything together. Just hold on to the story for 10-15 minutes. Can you do that? 10-15 minutes, and I will bring everything together. Right? And for your reference, I'm giving you this question also. If you want to practice, this is a practice question. Whatever information I've given you, you can write it in the question. For example, like the initial expansion of the British in India was based not on force but concessions. Elaborate 250 words. If you want to practice this question, you can send it to islive@byju's.com, and you can get an evaluated copy in 4 or 5 days as per the length of the answer. I encourage you to do it. But as we go on, I will also teach you answer writing, not today, but later. Okay. Magna Carta is the name of the British Constitution, which is a non-written constitution. Yes, Prerna. Okay. Now, let's talk about the Danes and the French and close this story so that this module is over and I can give you a very comprehensive summary. If needed, I will take 4 or 5 minutes extra, but I will do it for sure. Okay. Okay. Will you please repeat the question? You want to see the question? The initial expansion of the British in India was based not on force but concessions. Elaborate. Shyam, don't worry, no issues. Now, when we talk about the Danes in India or the Denmark in India, they will arrive in 1616 in India, their East India Company. And the first place they will establish themselves, I will give you a summary of Farooq Siyar. Don't worry, Sheikh, it will come to you. The first place where they established their trading post is a place called Tranquebar. Then Serampore, Calicut, and Nicobar Islands. So their issues were totally different. But their main concentration was on missionary activities. That bring as many missionaries as possible and just fill everything up and convert everybody. That nobody has the power to, and then the British never tried to also. So their presence will start somewhere here. Then they will go to Nicobar, then they will go to the Balasore sector, then to the Serampore sector, then to Calicut. But they will never be very successful in trading because their issues were different. And later what they will do is that they'll sell off everything to the British and by 1845 leave India. The Danes and the Swedish said that let's trade in tea, but they were never serious about these things. So the Danish are too small a footnote to actually be of any impact to the Indian subcontinent when it comes to colonialism. But they did come to India. Now, a power which we will talk about tomorrow and which is going to be very significant are going to be the French. See, the French were sleeping, literal sleeping like anything. Because they will realize the importance of India and Indian subcontinent and China trade and this trade. These wine drinking French will remember it in 1664. By this point of time, the Indian subcontinent, the British had already established itself very, very strongly. 1664, they already have 1632, 1639, 1640. Shah Shuja Farman will also be given. Now Louis the 14th will wake up from his slumber and say, we also need to go to trade in India. And he will establish the French East India Company in 1664. Now, the king said to the people, his aristocrats, give me some money. I am creating an East India Company. We'll go and trade in India. They said, we don't care. He went to private people. He said, money, East India Company. They said, you don't manage your money well. I'm not giving you one penny. So the East India Company, which was created by the French, they tried to create it through a private investment. But ironically, nobody was going to trust the French crown with their money. So there's no Bank of France, there is nothing. They said he's asking money to basically blow it on wine and he's not going to do anything generally. So the French East India Company was created, financed, and controlled by the state. There was no private investment in the company. So even the most closest of the allies and the relatives of Louis the 14th did not want to give money. But they were very attracted to the fact that this trade could be a game changer for the French. And the French, for a very long time, hated the British. And now they want to counter the British in India. In 1668, a person called Francois Caron will reach Surat. So you can see these copycats are not even having their own path. British reach Surat, they said hum bhi Surat chalte hain. They reach Surat. Then they said, where did the British go afterwards? In 1669, Mauchlypatnam chalte hain. Let's go to Mauchlypatnam. So wherever the British were, they were following the British. Then very close to Madras and Chennai, north of it, there was a ruler called Sher Khan. And they wanted a very close settlement to the British near Madras. And they will basically, Francois Martin will fight with Sher Khan, little bit negotiation, and they will get their Pondicherry settlement. This is going to be very significant. This will come to them in 1674 and will remain with them till 1961. So the French will leave only Pondicherry after liberation of Pondicherry. However, in between, the Dutch were able to capture Pondicherry. But then the Dutch thought that कुछ ज़्यादा हो गया, that let's not harass the French so much, and handed the French Pondicherry back in 1697. And then the French monarchy realized that the East India Company is useless. So they restructured the French East India Company in 1720 again, trying to revive its strength and push in a lot of money. Thereafter, there will be multiple governors who don't really matter to me. Basically, Martin, Lenoir, Dumas. But the one name which I want you to remember, because I'm going to bring him up tomorrow, is a person called Dupleix. Dupleix, if you can remember his name, Duplex, whatever you want to call him. Can you remember this name till 24 hours? And tomorrow I talk about him again. Can I do that? Can you do that? Other than that, all of this is of no purpose to you. That how they were trying to get Mauritius and Reunion Islands. Lemor and Duas will be able to do that also. French power will then expand into Mahe, Yanam, Karikal, and by 1721 into Mauritius. But Dupleix will be the most important governor in our perspective, because this story I will pick up in what is called as Anglo-French rivalry, and you would know it as what is called as the Carnatic Wars, are known as the Carnatic Wars, which we will discuss tomorrow. So what I've done after the British, as I told you, Sher Khan Lodi was the one who was the governor of Valipikonpuram, and he was the one which Francois Martin took concessions from and took Pondicherry. Pondicherry will be a very important source of power for the French in India, and it will remain till 1961, which we will talk about later. So I have discussed with you the English, and I have discussed with you the Danes and the French. There are maps which I put in. Is this important? No. French, I will tell you what is important tomorrow. There are maps which I put in this PPT to show you where the settlements of these different countries were. And you will realize that they are all gaggled around in the same sector. So you can see from Surat, Daman, Basin, Bombay, Goa, this whole sector is with the two powers. Then you have what is called Cananore, Mahe, Calicut, Kochi. Then again one whole set. Then whole this area, you see how many powers are there together. From Pulikat to Pondicherry to Calicut to the Madras sector to Mauchlypatnam to Yanam to Calcutta. What I mean to say is peninsular India was their major source of power, because this is where the ports are. You can use this to understand their presence. What I want to do in the last 9 minutes is give you a summary of the English timeline and give you a table for all the Farmans. Can I do that? But before I do that, can I successfully say that you understand the sequence of the French, sequence of the Europeans in India, and you also understand how the Portuguese and the Dutch were not able to do what they wanted to do in India. The British were very systematic in doing it. Danes were not interested, and the French challenge I'm going to discuss with you tomorrow in what are called the Acarnatic Wars in that sense. So you can expect a question from this area vis-a-vis how the English got a foothold in the Indian subcontinent. If this is clear, I want to just summarize everything in one place. French part, Ritika, don't worry about it. Tomorrow I pick it up. French came in 1664. 1674 they get Pondicherry. Dupleix is the governor of France, of French settlements in India. Three things if you can remember, then we will talk about them tomorrow. Okay? Okay. Now, so yes, sir, that's why four different places are one Pondicherry. Yes, Mahe, Karikal, Yanam, and Pondicherry. Great, perfect. Now, give summary. I'm giving you, Mayank. Wait. I'm coming to that. See, everything you want me to summarize, I'm summarizing it for you. You have 1600, 1613, 1615, 1632, 1639, 1651, 1668, 1689, 1691, 1717. Now, what is this? This is establishment. 1661 is not important to me. Establishment of East India Company in England and Royal Charter. 1613 is first factory, Surat, factories in Ahmedabad, Broch, Agra, and Moslipatnam, and presence in Bengal. Together, these two are called Jahangir Farmans. 1632 is Golden Farman. Golden Farman, which is 300, not 3000, but 500 pagodas to trade freely, duty free in Golconda. Thereafter, you have what is called the Chandragiri Farman, which is basically Madras is developed as headquarters of Eastern trade. Madras given on rent to English. 1651 is called Shah Shuja Farman, and basically 3000 rupiah per annum. This is also per annum for free trading in Bengal. Bombay given to East India Company by British Crown. Aurangzeb seizes British settlements. Aurangzeb pardons in 1690 and reinstates all power to British. And this is called the Farrukhsiyar Farman. Now, I want to give you a summary of the Farmans or the concessions. Can I do that? If this basic timeline is clear and these dates can be remembered by you. Can I give you the other a table for all the Farmans or the concessions together? Yes? Great. Okay, perfect. Now, these are called the concessions to the British. Okay. You have what are called the Jahangir Farmans 1613 1615. Then you have Golden Farman, which is 1632. Then you have Chandragiri Concession, which is 1639. Then you have Shah Shuja Farman, which is 1651. Remember, 1668 cannot be counted. It is not a concession from Indian rulers. Then you have Farooq Siyar Farman, 1770. So here, Surat first factory, access to Mausoleum brooch. They can establish a factory, that is totally on them. Agra, Ahmedabad, and Bengal. 300, no, again 300, I'm writing 500 pagodas to trade duty free in Golconda. Madras handed over on nominal rent. Thereafter, 3,000 rupiah to trade freely in Bengal. And last but not the least, Farrukhsiyar Farman, 3,000 rupiah for Bengal, 10,000 rupiah for Surat, rent of Madras for Hyderabad. All of this is to trade freely, duty free. Power to issue dastak and mint coins in India, buy land around Calcutta to expand. And with this adhyay is over. Dastak is that they can transfer any of these rights to anyone else. It's a pass which can be given to anyone else to give the same rights as the British. So if you don't have a question, you are eager to go to the webinar. Thank you so much. Hyderabad, the concept is in the Madras rent, you are getting the money for which you can trade freely in the Hyderabad, which is the Deccan sector. Right? Okay. Thank you so much. If you don't have a doubt, I'll see you tomorrow. We will talk about regional powers and the Carnatic wars. Now the wars are going to start. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow, same time. Can we use flowchart for concessional policy? Never make flowcharts as answers. That's a added addition. Okay. How was the power to decision making decentralized in case of British East India Company? Deepika, you will see it tomorrow. I'll show it to you tomorrow. Map in the PPT, don't have to remember any of it. Perfect, Nitya. See you tomorrow. Okay. Thereafter, you can send the answer as soon as possible. Totally your call. How to write answers in questions, I will tell you that in the further discussions. Okay. So take care. I'll see you tomorrow. Same time we take British expansion forward. See you.